So hi, this is Kirsty here on the Great Awakening Generator channel. And we're here today with our guest, Tessa Grigg. Um, and Tessa, well, she does quite a few different things, but she's a kinesiologist. She's been an educator for quite a few years in various sort of different ways. So she's been a primary school teacher, an early childhood educator, and she does a lot with music, and she has a special focus on sensorimotor education, which is really fascinating. And I'm sure we'll get into that a bit. And in recent years, she's done her PhD, and she's looked at the primitive reflexes and the way, and maybe some other reflexes, I'm sure she can elucidate, in the way they integrate in children and how that affects various ways they learn, etc. So she has a lot of really fascinating experience, and she's also a really busy woman. So welcome, Tessa, and thanks for taking some time to chat with us tonight.
Absolutely my pleasure, Kirsty. It's lovely to be here talking about things that I'm passionate about. So never a hardship at all.
Yeah, hopefully. And so, there's so many things we could talk about, but so the purpose of this part of the channel is to look at neurodivergence, which is a term that gets bandied around a lot, and it can cover a whole lot of different things. It's not just one thing. And we want to look at it from lots of different angles and perspectives. So keeping that in mind, I thought it might be interesting for you to look back kind of over the years a little bit and think about what are some of the major challenges or presenting behaviors or things that children need assistance with that have maybe consistently come up for you over the years. And also, has that changed at all? Is it evolving, the types of things that you see?
Okay, it's a very big question.
It is. So you break it down however you like.
Right. So children have changed. They have changed dramatically since I first started teaching. So when I first started teaching 1,000 years ago, I was so happy when a 5-year-old, because I started a new entrant class, and I was so happy when a 5-year-old arrived in the class able to recognize their name and they knew 5 colors. And I would go, now I'm made. This is a really good one. Over the years, that's changed as to what children are capable of. So now in my music class, I've got 2-year-olds who reliably know 10 colors. They recognize their name. I've got 4-year-olds that read the songs on my PowerPoint, because I put up the song words on my PowerPoint. And just because it's this immersion in language, suddenly they've learned the words to the parachute song and they know what they are, all that sort of thing. So they're really different in their capabilities. But the flip side of it is that in my kinesiology practice, I'm seeing a lot of children who are very stressed, basically. They have got major self-concept problems. They don't regulate well. They're often physically very poorly skilled. And let's remember, I get a very skewed view in my kinesiology practice, because nobody comes because their child's doing a really good job. So I feel like I really like my music class because it gives me a taste of, what's typically happening with a group of children as well. So I've got sort of both sides going on. But because I lived through the earthquakes as well in Christchurch, and there'll be other communities in New Zealand who've lived through similar situations, what happened was lots of children developed all kinds of behaviours that people wanted to put labels on. And these children didn't need a label before the earthquake. But after the earthquake, they were thinking, well, maybe this child does need a label. And so I noticed that happening. And so people would come and they'd go, can you just give me back my child? I just want the one that I had before the earthquake, and I would like to get it back. And so that's what I love about kinesiology, is that we were able to work through with a lot of those children and get things sorted for them. So I think our lifestyle has changed dramatically. We're better at diagnosing things. So there are things being diagnosed that might not have been diagnosed before. But I also think, and we've talked a little bit about this, Kirsty, that there's a very quick, that everybody's quick to diagnose. And for me, I struggle with that, because I think for some of these children, it's actually, and I've just come off a session where we've talked about how the children's milestones have been changed by the CDC in America. And, they're getting rid of a whole lot of things that are the key milestones, things like crawling. Crawling's gone.
What?
Nobody wants to crawl anymore, because, and
wow.
for somebody like me who thinks crawling is so important, and it's a gateway. What's happening, but it's that gateway to get children to develop skills that then get them sorted, organized neurologically, and that's not important anymore. And I'm just, the part of me just goes, oh no, tear my hair up.
That's wild, actually, to get rid of crawling.
It's hugely wild. But so yes, children are different. On one level, they're beautifully skilled and really well skilled, and on another level, we shouldn't have this big group of children who are not well skilled. And as you've alluded to in the introduction, quite a lot of that is stress-induced primitive reflex retention that's happening for children. And so they've got these reflexes. In fact, I saw a child today who is probably on its way to getting a diagnosis. And if you break it down, she's just really immature. If she was 3, nobody would be fretting about what she's doing at all. But she's not, she's 6. And so there's some fretting starting to happen. And basically she had some tricky things going on in her delivery. So, I'm somebody who likes to look for a soft fix first. And if the soft fix doesn't work, then we bring in the heavy artillery and, you need to do something. But there's lots of people who don't even know that there is a soft fix, and that it works with quite a lot of children, not all children, but it does work with quite a lot of children. And so that's I guess, the message that I want to get across to people, is that, if you can get onto these things nice and early, it helps a lot. And so taking the crawling out. So now there's no looking and saying, well, are these children crawling or not? Crawling's one of the first indicators that there might be an issue. So if a child's not crawling well, then I'm on that mum and I'm going, we're going to get this child crawling, and this child needs to crawl, and we get them crawling, and then a whole lot of things just take care of themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And if you look at this issue, it's so complex, because if a child is showing symptoms of struggling to learn, or if they're fidgety, if they're hyperactive, if they're volatile, if they're not very sort of normal in the way they socialize, there's such a massive host of possible reasons for that.
Of course.
And as you say, there's the reflexes, there's their diet, there's genetic differences in biochemistry, which are exacerbated by things like diet and toxins. There's, as you say, the massively emotionally stressful environment that we're in. There's disconnection from nature. So there's all these kind of things. And then at the same time, and there are people whose brains are not typical, but not broken. Exactly. And so it's like this puzzle of trying to figure out what's actually happening with someone. And if you first look at all of these things that might be out of whack, if you have a great diet, if you look at movement, if you look at reflexes, if you look at all of these things, if you don't look at something like ADHD or autism as a disorder, but you look at it as a different neurotype, once you take care of those things, you may be left with someone who's still really quirky, who's really creative, who's really out of the box, who's really sensitive. But they're the best version of themselves.
That's all
and I,
ever, yeah. That's all somebody like me ever wants, is that they can be the best version of themselves, but also function within where they need to function. So it's, whether they're trying to function within their family, whether they're trying to function within a school, and lots of the schools are involved in inclusiveness programs. So there is there's a much bigger, I don't want to say tolerance, it isn't the right word, but there's a bigger acceptance of how people are, and a realization that we actually need these children who think differently, because there is a thing, the thinking that's going on at the moment is not solving the problems. So we need those creative thinkers, and a lot of the people who made a big difference to the world would be called neurodiverse now, because they were the ones who thought outside the box. So we need those thinkers, but we need to harness their energy as opposed to fight with it. And that's, I think, what's been going on in the past, is that you put a label on it, you give it some drugs, and then you hope that it's going to behave normally. And that's never going to work. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No. And so, I think it's very much the case that sometimes you get these two camps of people. You get the neurodivergence is wonderful, we're just special, unique creatures, and that's just how we are. And then you get this is something that's broken and needs to be fixed. And what I love to see is like, well, it's neither, and it's both. And you need to look holistically at the individual you're dealing with. And
that's the hardest part, Kirsty, is that one system doesn't fix it for each child. So I've got good examples of children where all we did was take them off MSG.
Yeah, just like whoop.
And got a new child. And they still think a little bit differently, but they can self-regulate better. And they can manage, they can interact with other people better, and they don't get into trouble all the time, and all that sort of stuff works for them a whole lot better. I've got a child who, I think you might have read the article, where the school were very worried about this child and wanted it to go and get a diagnosis. But before the mum did that, she met a friend who said, go and see Tessa and see if she can, sort it out for you first. So we did that and took the child off MSG, and I gave the child back its sense of self. And the child went back to school, and over the next couple of weeks, the parents started to get positive feedback from the school about how well everything was going. And the school said, well, you realise that what we did was we gave the child a cushion, and so that she had her special place to sit. And both the mum and I are going, we're fine about that. If the school are under the impression that it's the cushion that's fixed the child, then that's great, because then they'll take ownership of that. But the mum's completely convinced that by getting this child in a better place emotionally, fixing up the diet, it's just completely transformed the child. It's been and a simple fix. And then the school said, oh, I don't think we need a diagnosis now. I think she's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
So how can it's interesting how you can go from, you need a diagnosis, something's wrong here, to this with a cushion. Anyway,
cushion,
here we go.
Yeah. And, and a fidgety cushion is probably great as well as as the other stuff, because, being able to move can be great.
Maybe
fidget around.
Maybe it was the combination of everything. Who knows? We'll never know, but it doesn't matter, because the child has the changes have been made, the child's much happier, everybody's just a lot more content. And I think that, again, if you've got a child who has got a clinical diagnosis of, say, autism, then to get that diagnosis for that family is really helpful. They need it because it gives them access to funding, it gives them access to support, it gives them access to understanding and education and a whole lot of things that I think are really important.
Yeah. My
biggest concern, and I know we had some communication about this, was the fact that if it wriggles a little bit, you want to put a label on it, and I just can't subscribe to that.
Yeah, totally. I think that the value of a diagnosis in our current climate is, as you say, is if it helps for other people to understand their child and have compassion and make some what they call accommodations. And if it helps the individual to understand themselves better, learn some things about the way they operate and learn some ways to work with that, then that's great. And funding, of course. And then, of course, ideally, what we'll end up with is a society where we don't need that anymore, because everyone gets so great at, accepting each other and bringing out the best in each other and helping each other to thrive. But we're really not there yet. So there are situations where that diagnosis is incredibly helpful. But it's, a label is only as useful as you make it. So it depends what you do with it. If you let it become this limiting thing, then that's what it is. It's limiting. Yeah.
And I think that is what's happening for quite a number of children, older children. I know of a 15, 16-year-old who's just desperate for a diagnosis because she really dislikes having to work in the classroom. And she's seen that other kids who've got a diagnosis have been able to work in another quiet room, and she'd much prefer to work in that quiet room. She's a studious child. And so she wants a diagnosis, and I'll be surprised if a psychologist will give her a diagnosis. But that's the other side of it, is that sometimes it's being used when in actual fact what we need to do. While I was away, apparently I was away, and they've said that they're going to put all the walls back up in the classrooms. Hallelujah. All the these big barns and these great big learning spaces for so many children just is not working. And so the only way that they can get help is by having a diagnosis, so yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is that rather than having a diagnosis, it's a change of environment, and that will look different for different children. Some children love an open plan classroom. I know it would have been a nightmare for me. I'm someone who likes complete quiet, minimal distractions. Yeah. And so that's another interesting question is, I suppose, moving forward, if we have more and more children who, whether they have an official diagnosis or not, are presenting in different ways, where they need to move, they are very strong-willed, maybe they're very sensitive. It's interesting to wonder how the education system is going to evolve to support this kind of changing demographic. And even things like, we all know that children do amazingly well in general when they can move a lot and be outside a lot. And it's sometimes tricky to balance that with modern life, where, most people need to send their kids to school still so they can go and work in an office. And it's this big question of how can we all support each other better and provide what those kids are really craving.
Well, Well, I think a lot of the teachers, I mean, this is why they're very stressed. The demands on a teacher at the moment are really high.
It's too much. Yeah.
Yeah. And even down to the number of children on IEPs, which are individual education programs.
Yep.
It's huge. You can have a class of 25 children, I think I heard the other day, of a teacher with 25 children, and 9 children were on IEPs. That's a lot, because each child has to have the IEP written. It's got to be followed through. You know, there's a big workload that goes with this. On the flip side, I know of 2 or 3 teachers in Canterbury who are working in a slightly unusual way with movement with their classes. They have got outrageous reading results. They've got the things they measure, like, so reading and maths, are just through the roof, you know, compared to from before when they weren't doing this program to when they were. And it's 10 minutes. Like, it's not a big amount of time. It's a really small amount of time. But it's, you know, making schools understand that in the morning, if the children are out moving, it's not a waste of time. It's a waste of learning time. Reading, doing maths and stuff like that. And one particular teacher who I'm in quite regular contact, she said, you know, the days where she doesn't do her wee movement things with her children are just awful. The children can't focus. They find it really, really hard. And, you know, it's not, it'll be because there's an event or something that she hasn't been able to do it. And the difference in them is quite big. So, you know, again, I think, and I liked what you said before about how people are disconnected with nature, but they're also quite disconnected from movement as well, a lot of people. And I find that is, you know, it actually isn't rocket science that we need to fix these things. A lot of it is quite simple. We were talking tonight about babies with iPads and cell phones. The baby's in a pushchair, it's got an iPad. It's like, no, that's not how babies are made. It's not what they're, you know, well, that's not what they're made for, watching iPads. So, you know, we're doing more and more of this. You know, I watch a 10-month-old that's not talking, going swipe, swipe, swipe. They know what to do, you know, they're digitally very savvy. Yeah. But, you know, is that child going to be good at riding a bike? Not, you know, it worries me.
Yeah, and that's right. And coming back to, obviously you work with music a lot, and I think it's fascinating and at the same time obvious to me that so many, you know, traditional type ways of dancing and singing, they naturally incorporate all these movements that are incredibly beneficial neurologically, right?
Absolutely.
You know, if you look at Poi, if you look at, you know, different indigenous types of dancing, and
the cultures, lots of those cultures had dance at the center of what they did, or drumming. So children who can keep a beat have better language, they have better academic skills. There's a whole lot of things. So a preschooler who can keep the beat, and again, that's not rocket science. It's very simple, and you don't need expensive equipment to learn to keep the beat. You know, everybody's got a wooden spoon and a bowl. You just bang the bowl on the wooden spoon, or the wooden spoon, sorry, on the bowl or the pot or whatever it is you've got. You know, it doesn't require expensive things, and it's not hard. And this, I always talk to mothers of young babies and going, a dance a day. You know, I don't care what else you do. You need to dance with this baby every single day. And those mums who pick their babies up and dance with them, it's really interesting. In fact, I'm nervous that my neighbour danced with her child a bit much, because her language at 3 is completely terrifying. She is able to, she's headed for, you know, Prime Minister material. She'll talk the hind leg off a donkey. She's hilarious.
And she sounds like my eldest boy, very precocious.
Have you got one of those too?
Yeah, the stuff that comes out of that mouth. He's 10 now, but he was like that as a toddler too. And you'd be like, what?
I just love it. I think it's particularly gorgeous, and it's to be, you know, honored and respected and everything. But I do think a dance a day is very helpful for children to be able to, and it's also about bonding. You know, that attachment is being shown to be a lot better with children who are danced with and sung, and children who are more securely attached learn better. So it all just feeds the whole thing. So yeah, for me, music and movement go hand in hand to getting well-rounded. You know, that's the other thing that we haven't talked about. I like children who have got a big range of skills. I'm not interested in going a long way in only one area. The children that I work with, I really like it if their skill base is very broad and they can do all sorts of things, because I think those children find a whole lot of life a lot easier later on. So that's how I encourage parents to set their children up basically with a very broad base of skills.
Yeah.
Music being one of them.
Yeah, music's just incredible, isn't it? We love it for a reason. Yeah. It's not just frivolity.
No,
but there's nothing wrong with a bit of frivolity either.
No, I think music, people sometimes think that music is sort of a bit of fluff or a nice to have if you've got time. You know, from somebody like me, music to me is as important as reading and writing. And if you can get that good music exposure and some good basic music skills, I've told everybody in the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and they won't want that. But if all children had some really good basic music skills by the time they're 5, then all sorts of other things just fall into place for them.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it's, you know, and it's vibrational medicine as well, of course, you know. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we want to wrap up with.
No, I think it's one of the most important things. If I think about parents with their children, the biggest thing they need is time. And unfortunately, that's the thing that most parents are extraordinarily short of. Time to fiddle around and play with children and just take the time, take a breath. And it's easy when you get older, because you know that it doesn't matter if the windows aren't clean, if the house is not perfect. But just being able to have that time with children. I wrote a book with my friend in Australia called Jane Williams, called Grandparent and Grandchildren, which really is a book for parents as well. But that's one of the things it talks about, is the fact that spending time with your children, talking to them, playing with them, is going to help them on all levels. So yeah, enjoy it. Children aren't children for very long. You know, my son's 23 and it's like that.
Yeah.
And suddenly you borrow them for a short time and then they're off doing their own thing. So it's to be enjoyed.
Yeah, honored to guide them for a time. And when you're in the thick of it in the early years, you know, I always think it feels very fast and very slow at the same time.
Depending on what sort of day it is.
It's one of those kind of paradoxes. But I think, you know, a lot of the answers to the things we're missing and the stresses do lie in more human connection, not less, and getting back to supportive communities, because, you know, a lot of parents and especially mothers are just trying to do so much on their own, and so many pressures now as well. Like, there's so much information about how to do it right. It can be pretty overwhelming. So
totally,
coming back to the basics of connection, movement, music is a pretty good place to start, I think.
Very good place to start. And talk to your grandparents. What did they do? Quite often they got it right.
Yeah, well, maybe don't give the baby the whiskey when they're crying and stuff like that. But
no, that's true.
Yeah, be discerning in the advice you accept from the grandparents, but there's definitely going to be some gems in there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Tessa, for this brief chat. I think we covered a lot of interesting information, and you've got a lot going on, but you know, I'll put some information about you in the description so people know where to find you if they're in Christchurch.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much.
That's a pleasure. It's nice to talk. Thank you for allowing me to indulge myself and talk about things that I love talking about. They're our greatest resource, parents and children. You know, parents are our best resource, really. It's good.
Yeah, that's right. They must support the parents. So, all right. Bye for now. I'll stop
Okay,
recording.
bye for now.